Disney Plus's Moon Knight is not a bad show. It's not a terrible travesty that ruined Moon Knight forever. It's not a big middle finger to the fans. It's not any of the crazy buzzwords you're imagining. But it's also very safe, tame, and afraid to challenge its audience with any subject matter that might cause controversy or potentially make people uncomfortable. And in a sense, I felt this series was afraid of its own source material because Moon Knight comics are obscure for that very reason. He's a weird character to wrap your head around with a lot of stories that most superhero books would be afraid to even touch. But the show was more concerned with just conveying the basics to the mainstream in the easiest way possible while glossing over the parts that would make it more of a standout. This is definitely the MCU-ification of Moon Knight, in that now he's just another funny PG-13 superhero that saves the world with big magic threats and has all these shallowly defined superpowers that allow him to stand shoulder to shoulder with future Avengers lineups. No, not the West Coast Avengers, the Avengers, whichever ones aren't dead or insane currently. It's not a bad show by any means, but watching it, it was very clear to me that this series wasn't really meant to be a love letter to Moon Knight or a passionate adaptation of the source material created by fans. It's a very basic show that only wanted to color inside the lines. Between making the story rather simplistic and toothless, erasing much of what made Moon Knight a unique character in service of making him more marketable to a wider audience, strange creative decisions for what to change and what to keep from the books, and just overall having the same major pacing issues as every Marvel Disney Plus show, I was left wanting more. People who follow my work know I'm a huge Moon Knight fan. I've been talking about him, cosplaying him, recommending his books for years, and I really can't get enough of the comic version of the character because he's so different, and his stories have so much variety. But the series lacked that variety and uniqueness. I just wasn't impressed by it in any way. And I guess the main reason for that is because the Moon Knight show just wasn't made for me, or really any of his longtime fans. We're irrelevant to this whole equation now, and that's sad, but it's just something we'll have to get used to. Let's start by answering the question of how they adapt Moon Knight in small and big ways. But first, a word from our sponsor. Special thanks to today's sponsor, Established Titles. Established Titles is a project based on historic Scottish custom where landowners are referred to as lairds, or lords and ladies in English. They allow you to buy as little as 1 square foot of dedicated land so you can be an official lord or lady. What would you do with 1 square foot of land? Plant a darn fine tree there. I love trees. Trees are cool and help us breathe and stuff. And you can climb them and put a swing in them. That's right, Established Titles plants a tree with every order to keep the ecosystem of Scotland thriving and green and support global afforestation efforts with charities like One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future. Your certificate features a unique plot number with which you can see the exact location of your land and go visit it if you wanted to. You can go see the tree that's your tree. Your square foot of land will be in Ardley, Aberdeenshire, Scotland, and you'll be sent an official certificate with a crest. It's a great novelty gift, and with Father's Day coming up, it'd be neat to get your dad one. Come on, your dad's a big goof, he'd probably love that, right? I already gave one to GodzillaMendoza Sr., and because you're a lord or lady, you can change your name to that on documents like credit cards or plane tickets or dating profiles. I'm sure there's at least one guy out there named Vader who has been waiting for this moment. Established Titles is running a big sale right now, and if you use the code LordMendoza, you get an additional 10% off. Go to establishedtitles.com/Lord Mendoza to get your gifts now. Now back to the video. I'd say aesthetically everything here is kosher. Get it? Well, it seems like the root for a lot of creative changes came from the sentence, "He can't be too similar to Batman," which is very frustrating because people who've read the character know the comparisons are very surface level. They begin and end with, he's got money, a utility belt, a cape, and he throws things at people that look like his logo, and he's got a fancy aerial vehicle that's on theme. All of these are just simple superhero shit that applies to a million other characters. But for some reason it's become a big problem that people think he's Marvel's direct equivalent to Batman. The choice to disassociate him from even these minor comparisons had a ripple effect that turned the show from being a powerless, street-level, dark vigilante with ambiguous elements of mysticism to just, he's Magic Indiana Jones, and he's got a teleporting mummy suit, and he can fucking fly like Superman, and he's invincible to stabbing. Unfortunately, I think that sucked some of what made the character so cool away. Their solution to make him less like Batman and more original was to make him more like Spawn. Again, visually I like his costume here. I think going so heavily on the Egyptian look was a good choice for making sure no one thinks he's a member of Carl's Cuts and Clips haircut group. And it's a nice change of pace from all the damn militarized, layered superhero suits covered in stupid line details that all serve no purpose. But as you can see from the mystical aspect of the suit, they leaned very heavily into the magic stuff and left no room on the table for ambiguity. Often in the comics, the line of Khonshu being a real entity or just an abusive and controlling alter in Marc Spector's system is blurred. Some writers in the past have made it a little less clear if Khonshu was ever real or not, and it was fun while it lasted, but this show dropped all pretenses of that, so now the comics have to keep up. Other people can just flat out see Khonshu. Marc's costume isn't a costume, it's a magic enchanted armor that he summons. It's not entirely unfounded for him to receive a costume from Khonshu, though. The Fist of Khonshu run from the comics in the 80s started with Marc retiring as Moon Knight and trashing his own costume, but he was led by voices in his head to this hidden Egyptian tomb where a group of Khonshu acolytes gave him a new suit and a bunch of magic weapons. That costume had some gold bracers on the arms and an Ankh symbol on the chest, which may have confused his brand a little. It also looked stupid because he had no gloves. It was so dumb. Why would you have a full body costume without gloves? That looks terrible. It looks wrong. But the suit didn't teleport in and out of time and space with a magic hood that made him fly or some shit. It was still a normal costume. The quote-unquote magic gadgets weren't infinitely spawning moon rings or truncheons, but a golden normal boomerang and an Ankh that glows when it senses danger, which is exactly as useless as it sounds, so he ended up just kind of hitting people with it instead like it was a baseball bat. He did have powers in that run too. He got super strength at night because he was empowered by the moon. There's a precedence for some of these ideas in the books, I suppose, but this is a weird place to pull from considering this run is one of the less interesting ones and it was cancelled and rebooted after only 6 issues, with much of its contributions to the character being ignored entirely, with the third run of the character just sort of soft rebooting it. It seems like they searched high and low for anything they could use as an excuse to drop all of the Batman-esque stuff. And that decision wasn't made for fans of the character because we already know he's not Batman. That's made for the Grace Randolphs out there that can't find any other way to describe him, and have accidentally made people unfamiliar with him think he's a shameless ripoff by using that point of reference so much. And I know this has to be where they got these damn ideas, because this run is the first and only appearance of Arthur Harrow. See, when I was first watching this show, I saw him and thought, wait, isn't that the Mad Thinker from Fantastic Four? Because I couldn't remember the name Arthur Harrow. I'd read almost all of Moon Knight and didn't recognize that guy at all. But apparently I did read the book he appeared in years ago. I just didn't remember him because the character was a forgettable throwaway. He's a mad scientist with facial paralysis that was kidnapping people and experimenting on them to try and fix his face. And, yeah, he only showed up once and was never mentioned again. He had nothing to do with Egyptian mythology, he wasn't a former avatar of Khonshu, he had nothing to do with Amit or anything. My god, we were editing this, and I actually thought to go back and reread the book again, just to be sure. And Moon Knight never actually technically meets Arthur Harrow. He just sees him, like, on the other side of a room, and then Harrow runs away, and they never say a single line of dialogue to each other, and that's it. And he never caught him, and then they never met again. And that's the whole villain. That's him. They never even met, technically. He saw him way in the distance running away, and that's it. What the fuck? Marvel Studios picked such a nobody for the villain that I even saw articles online where they were trying to explain who he was, and they were struggling for that appealing side-by-side comparison so much that they needed to use another character entirely for the header. That's Sun King. This character's so similar to Sun King that I'm not sure why they didn't just use him instead. That guy had cool, scary pyro powers and served raw, so you could still do the rival gods thing. Sure, he's a more recent character, but he was at least a noteworthy one that had a whole storyline devoted to him for multiple issues. The show's version of Arthur Harrow is just so completely and totally divorced from any comic counterpart that I don't know why they didn't just make him an original character with a new name. I think they created some rando to be the bad guy and just slapped the name of a character listed in the Moon Knight Villains wiki on him as a formality. This is how fucking Sony makes villains. Why not just call him something else like you did with Layla? And as far as villains go, I think Harrow shares similarities with his namesake in that both are bland villains that are just utilitarian. He's just there because the show needed a villain, and I think Marvel pussied out of using Bushman because they didn't want to use an African warlord arms dealer with a tattoo of a skull on his face. I doubt they'll do anything with Midnight Man since the actor unfortunately passed away and Disney is becoming so allergic to recasting actors now. Either the character has to be written away forever, or they'll be resurrected via ghoulish grave-robbing CGI or AI-generated performances. So I guess for Season 2, or the future Moon Knight movie, or whatever, they'll just have to figure out how to make Bushman Disney acceptable, or just use another obscure one from one issue. You can't use Randall! I was also really irritated to see that Marc's best friend and helicopter pilot, Jean-Paul Frenchy Ducamp, was relegated to an Easter egg. I have suspicion this is because his character is gay and Disney wanted this show to be watched overseas, so they chose to ignore his existence. The rest of the side cast of characters got pretty shafted too. Crawley has no real plot relevance, even in the scenes where they're directly adapting the Jeff Lemire run where he's really important. And Marlene Alrone is now written very similarly, but also a different character entirely too somehow. They changed Marc's longtime love interest around, so now her name is Layla El Fayouli, to give the main cast a little more Egyptian rep, which wasn't a bad idea considering how tied the character is to Egypt. It is weird that everyone in this book is white for the Egyptian-themed superhero, but I'm just confused as to why they couldn't just cast this same actress and have her character's name be Marlene El Fayouli. It would make explaining Moon Knight's love interest to new people less confusing. Well, she's the same character, but her name is different, but she has the same origin because her dad was an archaeologist that Bushman killed, but she's blonde, but she's not a superhero with flying wings, but she does pretty much act the same. I think she's one of the stronger aspects of the show, and I liked how they kept her and Marc's weirdly toxic and dishonest relationship that's always destined to fail. She loves him, but he's such a walking disaster that it's hard to be around him for long stretches, and sometimes his alters are easier to get along with than he is. That's all okay, they did a good job on her. I also don't mind giving her the powers of that Scarlet Scarab guy from the old Invaders comics. It's a deep cut, but it fits with the rest of the show. I did find this moment kind of forced and cringy, though. Look, there's definitely not enough Egyptian superheroes. I can barely think of any. And I think it's a great thing that darker-skinned girls with frizzy hair can look at the TV and see a hero that looks like them. That's important. But this moment felt like they were really trying to force that connection instead of just letting it form naturally with the audience. You don't need to spell it out like that by writing it into the script. Let it happen organically. Imagine if Captain America stopped an Ultron bot and some civilian stopped and said, "Are you a 35-year-old virgin superhero?" "Why, yes I am." This is far from the worst thing about the finale episode, but it was one of the things that irked me. I'd say that the only character that the show nailed top to bottom for sure was Khonshu. This is the perfect neutral Khonshu that is versatile enough that he can do any of the things the writers want to do with him. In the comics, he's been written as sarcastic and antagonistic, noble and kind, toxic and manipulative. He can be a good guy, or a straight-up villain, or somewhere in the middle. This Khonshu from the show feels like he can be a little of all of these things without being inconsistent if he goes either way. High marks for that. I actually thought he was the best part. And what of Moon Knight himself? Well, obviously he's a pretty complicated character, or characters. I'd say I think Marc Spector himself was handled well. He's a guy internalizing a lot of guilt, trauma, and suffering, and he's using that pain to fuel his anger as Moon Knight. He serves Khonshu not because he's a zealot, but because someone has to, so he treats it like a dirty job that he's not totally proud of. But he's dedicated to it, and sometimes he can even find it fun. Oscar Isaac performed his ass off, and his ability to seamlessly switch from Marc to Steven mid-sentence was really impressive. At no point in these scenes where they're talking to each other do they feel like the same guy. He really disappeared into both characters, and I think the casting was a great decision. And the choice to make Marc, Steven, and Jake all speak in different accents or languages was a really great way to help us as an audience to distinguish them without a costume change. My problems with Steven and Jake, however, stem from the writing.
I am sick. I know that. I will never be cured. This is always going to be who I am. But I can still live. I can still have a life. And I won't let you ruin that for me anymore. Please, you need me. No, Khonshu. I am Marc Spector. I am Stephen Grant. I am Jake Lockley. And we are going to be okay. We are going to live with who we are. We are Moon Knight, and we never needed you. Quiet. For the first time in a long, long time, our mind is quiet. And I just let it wash over me. I let it be quiet.
Even though Jake Lockley is the protector of the system, he's very friendly and the only alter that people have an easy time getting along with. He hangs out with everybody. People talk to him. He's chill. He's a chill guy. Come on. He'll fuck you up sometimes, but mostly he's chill. Potentially leaning into the evil alter trope at this point is tired and bordering on just being offensive, given that real people at DID don't always have a Green Goblin in their heads. I'm hoping in future MCU appearances they won't just make him a flat-out bad guy, because that shit's tiring. Oh, but it'd be interesting if the antagonist was also the protagonist. Just go watch Fight Club. On the other hand, Stephen Grant is a calm and civil businessman that was a pacifist, and they had to de-Batman that, so now he's broke and has no money, but then they exaggerated his personality to make him into a cartoon character. He is way over the top, and it screws with the tone of the whole show. At no point in any Moon Knight books did I think of him as like the comic relief that added levity. If anything, that could have been Crawley's job if they included him more. I'm really fucking... They should have... Why did they leave out Crawley? He's such a good character. But Steven is so silly and wacky now, and they've assigned Mr. Knight as his superhero identity when he summons the magic costume, instead of using Mr. Knight as a natural evolution of Moon Knight. I understand that this was meant as a visual way of distinguishing what mind was in charge of the body, but now people think Mr. Knight is a posh British Deadpool and are going to be disappointed when they crack open the books and see he's not that at all. In fact, some writers even suggest that Moon Knight and Mr. Knight themselves are actually different alters. But the show needed to simplify for a new audience, and the result is that Mr. Knight is now another example of a common trope I see in the MCU.
Driver, anonymized calling system. Leave a message for Detective Flint giving this location. Drone, predator mode. This location. Mantle. Listen, where you're going, tell your friends. Tell everyone you meet. You tell them all. When you see me coming, run.
The MCU often tries to make superpowered characters more likable and relatable by injecting a little bit of Jar Jar Binks' DNA into their bloodstream, so they're clumsy, prone to comical failure, and nervous. Not necessarily because they're new at being a superhero and learning the ropes, and it's a visual shorthand for them being inexperienced. In some cases, they've been doing this for years and are still falling flat on their faces simply because it's funny. They did it with Spider-Man, Ant-Man, Star-Lord, and later on Thor. And as such, people really like that version of those characters. Because a character being too competent and badass apparently makes them unrelatable. After months of intense deliberation among my peers in the scientific community, we've come up with a classification for these characters to differentiate them from their comic counterparts in an efficient way. I like to call this type of characterization the funny little penis man who trips on his balls and goes boom.
Sup, penis Parker?
Spider-Man can't stop a moving vehicle in this scene because the plot needs him to fuck up. So even though we've seen him do it before successfully, he can't now, and his strength is weirdly reduced for one scene. Now he's slipping and sliding and smashing into trash cans and being a funny little penis man tripping on his balls. These characters are only allowed to be badass in the moments where it serves as an intense juxtaposition from their previous behavior, where the audience goes, "Oh wow, look at that, he finally got something right for once." As opposed to being able to accomplish basic tasks without the boobery buffoonery quite frequently. Look, I get what they're going for. Seeing our heroes mess up sometimes makes them fallible and human. They can't be 100% in control all the time, but it starts to become frustrating as a viewer when screwing up is their default state and getting things right is the exception. This sort of thing needs to be used in moderation, or the character just seems like an incompetent clown and I stop rooting for them. Instead of making Mr. Knight tough, badass, or really intimidating, he too is a funny penis man tripping on his own balls and going boom, for all but maybe one scene in the final episode where he finally shuts the fuck up and just fights. That's his big, oh, he got something right for once moment. Obviously I find this trope a little bit tiring, but it certainly has its audience. That audience being younger people on social media who like to draw fan art of the characters being cute and silly. The people who accept the woobification with open arms because they actually love seeing a tough superhero be a precious little small bean. Then they can post compilations on YouTube of Stephen Grant being too pure for this world for 10 minutes and squeal with delight as he charmingly stammers and stumbles at every step of his adventure. I'm not in that community and I can't really relate to their love of that, but that doesn't mean they're invalid and that they aren't a big part of what sells these projects. The stands pining for dopey little guys are probably a major factor in drumming up social media attention for these projects. And I think the showrunners and directors are aware of this and try to placate them a little with the slapstick nervous wreck characters being hilariously bad at things. Given that this series puts such an emphasis on this type of humor, as well as a giant silly Disney cartoon hippo designed to sell Funko Pops, I have further evidence that, again, I was not the target demographic for this show. Kevin Feige tried to make me think I was at one point by boasting about how this show has a bit more edge than usual MCU products, and features scenes of Marc Spector really letting loose with the violence and wailing on people. Maybe this was true at some point in development before, like, a reshoot was added to make it more family-friendly, or maybe this was just a flat-out lie. But the only examples of this are Moon Knight beating on an unconvincing CGI effect mostly off-screen, or a scene where they literally do pull back from the violence. This is the exact definition of pulling back and turning a moment that was starting to get interesting into another comedy beat. Things like this start to make me dislike Steven as a character because he's just making things harder by being too silly.
We're all worked up. Let's all just like chill the F out.
This is emblematic of the show's just straying away from any and all material that the audience might find uncomfortable.
Of course, there's being raised Jewish, and then there's being raised by a rabbi. My father was the kindest, gentlest man I've ever known, but there was never anything kind or gentle in me. He was a man of peace. He hated violence, and I thought that made him weak. A weak man serving an indifferent God. Because those were our stories, weren't they? We lost our homes, our land, we were enslaved, and then escaped out into the desert. And from then, up till now, we took our licks from practically everyone. My father taught me that it was our perseverance that was our greatest quality as a people. How we never gave up our faith, our laws, our covenant with God. How we could laugh to keep from crying, no matter what happened to us. So when I died in Selima, can you blame me for accepting Khonshu's offer? I put aside a God who had let terrible things happen to his people. A God who I had never seen, never heard, in favor of a God who spoke right to me and promised, "Join me, be my son, and together we will get things done."
Bloody action scenes are entirely off-screen, any semblance of gore is out of focus and heavily obscured and then quickly rushed out of frame. I mean, maybe if you're like 5 years old, these mummies are scary, but like, ugh. I don't even like the stupid cutting off a guy's face thing from the comics. That was way over the top, but this show is just so toothless. Subject matter like Marc's religion are taken from the major points of conflict of the character and reduced to what is basically just a quick Easter egg. A huge element of Moon Knight is that he's one of the few openly Jewish characters in Marvel Comics whose faith plays a big part in his character, and his complicated relationship with his faith is what led him to accepting Khonshu's offer in the first place. His father was a rabbi that was a victim of a hate crime from neo-Nazis in America. His father being a pacifist and turning the other cheek from the attack was what led Marc Spector to embrace a violent lifestyle and go from underground prize fighting to the military, to being a mercenary, to being a vigilante superhero. Reducing that felt cheap to me, like they included it simply because they knew they had to, not because they wanted to explore that part of the character. But hey, it's Disney after all.
Oh yeah, I forgot this is a Disney universe.
Intergenerational trauma, racism, and lapses of faith would harsh our buzz. We're just trying to make a fun superhero show for the whole family, brah. I really worry that the Ms. Marvel show will heavily reduce the Muslim elements of Kamala Khan to placate overseas markets and ensure that Islamophobes don't squirm while watching it. Money first, art second. I'm sure a lot of Ms. Marvel fans will feel exactly how I feel in a few months when they realize that show wasn't made for them either. In fact, I think they already feel that way from turning the character into Green Lantern for flimsy justifications. That bracelet isn't a family heirloom from your grandmother who wore it while escaping Bombay during the partition of India and Pakistan. That's too heavy. Now it's a cosmic band from Captain Marvel or something. Ugh. The only moments where the show starts to have some gumption are explaining what continuous and sustained trauma in Marc's childhood led to him developing alters. But the abusive mother subplot is quickly hurried off screen as fast as possible once the information is conveyed. They literally slam the door on it and don't come back to it. They didn't want to linger on it at all, and that creates a problem where Marc never really confronts it head on, which they show is something he's terrified of doing. There's no conclusion to this arc. Apparently there was a whole scene in the final episode with him confronting the memory of his mother, and they cut it to give more time to giant monsters fighting and a laser shooting into the sky. Oh, God. Much like the rest of these MCU Disney Plus shows, this suffers greatly from its rushed 6-episode runtime, and the issue of Marvel Netflix shows where the character loses their powers for an introspective, mid-season emotional slump. It's too short to be a solid season of television, and it's too long to be a concise movie, so now it's just... ugh. These shows always build so much to the big finale that flaccidly just wraps everything up in 30-ish minutes and tells you to buy tickets to the next movie instead of being a self-contained story. Much like the rest of these, the finale doesn't feel like a satisfying conclusion to this epic tale of good versus evil, just quickly rushes to a halt. In fact, the villain is beaten off screen. I think this may be one of the absolute worst, most baffling decisions I've ever seen from a mainstream series. The coolest and most interesting part of the final battle isn't shown to us in favor of further hyping up this plot twist of Jake Lockley. Even though they telegraphed the fuck out of it the whole show so far, they needed one more instance to spoon-feed to you that there's clearly another alter they're not showing. Like, we got it! You showed us already, like 4 times! I wonder if this was the result of a budget cut or a scheduling conflict or what, because this ruins the entire climax of the show. Our hero is at his lowest point, defeated, feeling hopeless as the villain of opposing morality and ideology stands over him triumphant. And then he blinks and the fight's over and it's all been resolved.
Nice and slow.
Don't tell Harry.
Everyone along the chain of command that thought this was a great idea needs to be lined up and systematically kicked in the balls. This is not how you tell an exciting conclusion for an action series about a superhero saving the world. He saves the world off screen. And no, I won't let anyone handwave this as a bold and unique decision. Man, you just want it to be like every other superhero movie. They did something special and new. Not having an actual ending is totally a cool new thing. This is cinema, bro. I wish more movies just told me things instead of showing me. Exposition is the most natural form of storytelling in a movie if you really think about it.
Someone has to do this. The other guys, the world savers, they've got their own jobs to do. A giant monster pops out of the ground in the financial district. Call the Fantastic Four. Magneto trying to wipe out the human race. X-Men on the job. Invasion of alien vessels? That's what the Avengers are for. That leaves this. Daredevil? What's he gonna do, brachiate from Hell's Kitchen to Spanish Harlem? Spidey? He's got his hands full with all the B-list supervillains. So, someone has to do this. Someone has to do the fun stuff.
In the grand scheme of things, this series is clearly making big strides to push Moon Knight as an Avengers-level hero. Now he's not just strong and has gadgets, he can fly, regenerate from wounds, conjure weapons from thin air, reverse time on a galactic scale, or make giant illusions that everyone in the world can see simultaneously. And he's got the uncanny ability to kill people off screen for censorship purposes. I've said before that Moon Knight is a very versatile character in the comics, and his obscurity is his strength. There's not really a set status quo for his life, and things can change a lot from one run to the next. Every writer on him has free reign to do something a little different, but that's not to say he's an inconsistent character that has no defined tone and personality at all. Even if this run focuses on his mental illness, or this run is like an episodic detective story, or this run is about his toxic relationships and self-destructive tendencies, they're all still about the same guy. He still feels like the same character in different stories. Sure, the stories can range from a little more lighthearted to way darker, or more introspective to more adventurous. But the basics are still there that he's a street-level hero in New York, and there's a darker tone to his stories than most Marvel characters. It seems like the series ignored some of these basics to differentiate him from Batman and build him up to be less street-level and more of an international hero that saves the world instead of busting serial killers or hunting the occasional monster at night. This has more of an Indiana Jones feel, and I'm not opposed to that decision, but I feel like it was made for a sketchy reason. Taking Moon Knight out of the street level just to have him hang out with more MCU characters sucks, because there really isn't any street level rep in the MCU anymore. Spider-Man certainly doesn't count at this point unless they do some backpedaling.
I mean, I'm just a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, sir.
Bitch, please, you've been to space.
The Defenders all got axed, and if they do show up, it'll be for more crossovers with the movie characters, because that's the only thing they haven't done with them. So, the best we got is just Hawkeye for street level. The street level part of Marvel and DC comics are important. It adds perspective and realism and relatability to these fictional universes. These big events in the Avengers movies affect the average guy on the street constantly, and it's important to see that to remember what these fantastical characters are fighting for and what the consequences of their actions have. I really like how Daredevil's plot was set up by the first Avengers movie. The criminals in Hell's Kitchen used the chaos and destruction from that battle to seize power. This is something really too small to concern the Avengers-level heroes, but it was costing lives for people in the city and was something a street-level hero like Matt Murdock had to clean up. But as time has gone on, the street-level perspective with everyday lives has become less and less represented in these movies and shows. Seeing Moon Knight ditch that in favor of traveling around the world and having kaiju fights is disappointing, to say the least. It's implied that he's been Moon Knight for a while now, but all those smaller level adventures fighting crime in the previous 5 years were reduced to backstory and exposition, instead of just letting us see that. I wish that was what the show was about. I want that.
I kind of came back with a pitch that was tailored kind of towards the stuff I love and the stuff I grew up on, which is Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's Ghostbusters, it's Amblin films, it's the Brendan Fraser Mummy movie. It's things like that. There was a lot of DNA in the pitch of like, let's take some of the best visuals and ideas from the Jeff Lemire run, but let's sort of wed it to this big, crazy, globe-trotting Indiana Jones-esque adventure, because that's something that hasn't been done before in the MCU. There's been plenty of shows that have had sort of the street-level vigilante beating up the purse snatchers and the drug dealers and things like that. We could have very easily made a Moon Knight show that was much more faithful to those roots, but I don't think Kevin was interested in that. I think he was really looking to make a Moon Knight show that felt unpredictable and wild and really took the audience on a ride. I think that's why I probably got the job over all the people I was pitching against. I think our 80s taste probably just lined up in the right way.
Disassociating Moon Knight from being a more down-to-earth hero is going to have an effect on the comics. In fact, I think it already may have. The recent Age of Khonshu arc in the Avengers books will leave a permanent mark on the character. The ambiguity was tossed out there entirely. Khonshu is definitely real, other people can absolutely see him. Marc is magic and can do anything like beat up Thor and steal Iron Fist's powers and use the Phoenix Force, and then Black Panther goes, "Wow, dude, you're OP as shit, you wanna join the team?" I can't help but feel the timing isn't a coincidence, and this book was released just shortly before the series to get us used to the idea of Moon Knight being completely different going forward. And not different in it's a new interpretation by a new writer way. I mean, different in the MCU version is now the default and all previous variety is going away for the foreseeable future kind of way. The Jed MacKay run of Moon Knight has been really good so far, but I fear it'll be the last one that isn't just a big advertisement for the movies. Only time will tell. The show got a lot of things wrong, made a lot of questionable choices, and is likely going to semi-permanently alter the character now that he's hit the big time. But it's just close enough that I can't say it was way off. It's just well made enough that I can't say it was a terrible show. It's just so in the middle. And it got just enough right that people are going to get accused of being nitpicky if they didn't think it did the character justice. As an adaptation, it felt superficial. Everything looks right, but nothing feels 100%. Moon Knight is an unconventional and unique character, but this show was so risk-averse to avoid scaring its audience away that they made something incredibly conventional. The showrunners made every decision to make it easier to digest and appeal to as many people as possible. I may not have liked it, but I know plenty of people did, and this was by design. I see a lot of kids on Twitter who really liked this Moon Knight. Each week, my dad's roommate would ask me what I thought of the new episode, and I just tried to not be a complaining bitch about it because I knew he liked it, so I'd just be like, yeah, it's alright. And he's not really a comic book guy. He didn't know a thing about Moon Knight, and he still liked the show a lot, and I wasn't going to be a pretentious dick and tell him he's wrong because, again, he was the target audience, not me. As much as I had my grievances about the show warping the character, being too light and silly, straying too far from challenging topics, and just generally being really samey with the rest of the MCU stuff, my opinion is irrelevant. The people producing this series know they've alienated a few hardcore Moon Knight fans, and that's fine, because it doesn't affect their bottom line. They make their money regardless, and that's what matters most to them. It's about just making that money. I'm screaming into the void at the end of the day, because people like the kids on Twitter making the cute fan art of Steven and Marc hugging, and laughing at Mr. Knight tripping on his balls, and my dad's roommate liking the show because he doesn't care about comic books. Those are the people that made this show successful, and they're who it was made for. If those people liked it, then it was a big success. And as much as it sucks that I can't really enjoy it as much as them, I can't change it. I gotta just get over it. I once really wanted this character to have a movie or TV show, and now I kind of regret ever thinking that because it's going to have consequences for the character in the comics that I don't want to deal with. But I'll have to anyway. The moon still rises and sets regardless of a few diehard Moon Knight fans feeling let down. That's how things work now. Fringe characters like this need to be molded and warped until they're able to produce dollars easily. If they can't fit in the formula, then they need to be changed. It happened to plenty of Marvel characters in the past, and it hurts every time it happens to one of my favorite characters. With the ever-expanding roster of MCU shows and movies every year, no uniquely niche character is safe from being turned into another safe and marketable money machine. Pretty soon it'll happen to your favorite character, and you'll just have to get over it too. Hey guys, our team put a lot of effort into this video, so if you want to support us, see upcoming videos a bit early, and get some exclusive behind-the-scenes stuff, including some patron-exclusive videos, make sure to head over to the Patreon. It's only $1, and you get everything for just $1. Just $1, I swear to God, the whole thing is all $1. Special thanks to Mike for doing the voice of Marc Spector in a couple of our motion comics things. If you want to see some more of those that ended up getting cut for time, that are fully extended and whatnot, go over to Patreon and we'll have a couple of those. And also a few patron exclusive videos of like vlogs and stuff that are coming out soon. It would be really nice. Thank you. I love you. Bye.